Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi tahirin. We are continuing our brief lessons of spirituality, spiritual points, and akhlaqi points, and irfani points. We're talking about some points about how to how to worship Allah with joy. And in that, we have some different topics that we're discovering along the way, we're presenting along the way. And one of them that I will talk about here is something called Gaswatul Kalb. What's Gaswatul Kalb? This means the hardness of hearts. This is the hard-hearted, the hard heart. We have a heart. By heart here, I don't mean the physical heart, because the word kalb, the word heart, could be used in different ways. It could be used to talk about the physical heart, it could be used to talk about the emotional aspect of a person, or it could be used to talk about the nafs, the soul. So here, what we're talking about is the soul. We're talking about the soul, the hardness of the soul, the hard heart. And this can also emanate through one's emotions, because as I was saying the last time, emotions are impacted by what we think and what is our worldview. So how we think, the thoughts, the ideas, the worldview will impact our emotions. So if we have a connection to something and we think about it and we have some ideas in us, that is potential to impact our emotions. Emotions are stirred up through ideas, through thoughts. And this is why a person should not misuse ideas. A person should not narrate false stories. A person shouldn't add spice to a tragedy just to get people's tears and capture them. What should be done is that the reality of it, if something was unjust, something was a tragedy has happened, the reality of it for a soft heart should be enough. That should be enough to stir up emotions and for them to shed tears and for them to relate and take lesson from that event. But one of the serious diseases of the soul, one of the serious maladies of the self, just like we have physical sicknesses, we have soulish sicknesses. One of the serious maladies and sicknesses of the self is hardness of heart, Gaswatul Kalb. This is when one's heart is hard. One's heart is hard, so that they will not experience the dhikr. They will not experience the reminder. They will not be impacted from the lessons. They will not heed to warnings. Warnings will not have an effect on them. Admonitions will not have an influence on them. So one would, in this kind of malady, they could sit there and hear the Quran, but it never penetrates their hearts. They could sit there and listen to a true story, and they'll never take a lesson from it. They'll never be impacted. They could have things going on around them in life, but they are not sensitive to them. They're not experiencing them. They're cold to them. This is hard-heartedness. One does not take lessons. The tadhakkur, the lessons will not impact and influence their hearts. The lessons will not influence them. The reminders will not impact them. The admonitions and the warnings, the prophets were sent as mubashirin wa mundhirin, givers of glad tidings and warners. Those glad tidings and those warnings will not impact them. So this is a hard heart. A hard heart is like that. So what do we have to do? What must be done? Well, one must soften their hearts. One must soften up their hearts because their heart has become hard. They must soften up their soul. So before we talk a little bit about what are some of the factors that contribute to the heart becoming hard, and then from that you can understand what you should do is that you should oppose those factors. You should go against those factors to try to soften the heart. Okay? So this is a method that I could advise here. Inshallah, it will be useful. So before we talk about what other factors or some of the factors that contribute to a hard heart, I should mention that there are 3 types of dhulm, oppression. We like to say, somebody takes our right, you're an oppressor. This person oppressor, that person oppressor. But oftentimes people may not look in themselves and see how we ourselves are oppressors as well. Dhulm, oppression, is like not putting the things in their right place. Everything has its right place. Rights have their right place. Obedience has its right place. So dhulm, if you want to say like literally, this could like putting things not in the right place. There's discussion on the lugawi meaning of dhulm and how we could take it in a technical senses and literal senses. We could, and the words that derive from. But anyways, besides that, it's not the point of what I'm bringing here. We're going to classify dhulm, oppression, into 3 types. The first type of oppression that we can say is oppression to the rights of Allah the Exalted. Dhulm to the rights of Allah the Exalted. Now, question, can someone oppress Allah? No way! No one can ever oppress Allah the Exalted. Allah the Exalted is not needy. He is not impacted by anything. He is all powerful and all knowing. Nothing can have an influence and impact on Allah the Exalted. If Allah does it, it's because Allah does it. Nothing has power or authority over Allah the Exalted. Allah the Exalted has the power and authority over everything. So what's meant by oppressing the rights of Allah? Exactly that. Oppressing the rights of Allah the Exalted. Allah the Exalted has put rights. He has put some rights. Those rights relate to the right of Allah the Exalted, such as that you worship only Allah the Exalted. So it's not hurting Allah, it's not harming Allah, but rather it's harming yourself. But this is oppression to the right of Allah the Exalted. So the first type of dhulm is oppression to the rights of Allah the Exalted. The second is oppression to oneself. How can you oppress oneself, you may ask? How am I a dhalim to my nafs, to myself? Well, we become dhalim to ourselves, we become oppressors to ourselves when we commit sins, when we commit transgressions. That's oppression to ourselves. So sins and transgressions are oppressions to ourself, or oppression to ourself. So if we commit sins, we are a dhalim ila nafs, to ourselves, to the self. Okay, so the right of Allah, if you do not do it, you oppress oppression to the right of Allah. That's the first type of oppression. Oppression to oneself, that's sins and transgressions. That is the second type of oppression. Third type of oppression. The third type of oppression is the one that people are most familiar with, but yet they probably differ a lot on what actually is applicable to this category. That is oppression to the rights of others. Oppression to the rights of others. Allah the Exalted has placed some rights of others, like right of ownership. Yes, Allah owns everything, but He has given ownership of some property, some things to certain individuals. Now, if a thief comes and he steals that property, he is an oppressor. He is an oppressor to the rights of that person. Now, there's many different rights. Like there's rights between husband and wife. There's rights between neighbors. There's rights between there's rights of property. There's rights, different types of rights. So there's different type of rights that Allah the Exalted has put there. Now we have to search thoroughly in our resources and gather them all together. But this generally, just the idea is that we have now 3 types of oppression. Oppression to the right of Allah, oppression to oneself, which is sins and transgression, and oppression to the rights of others. If a person does any of these 3, they are a dhalim. They are an oppressor. If they're doing all of them, they are an oppressor in plural. They're oppressor in all the categories. So we can say that oppression, keep in mind that categorization I gave you, that oppression contributes to a hard heart. And from oppression, we can see some important categories which arise. So from those ideas of those types of oppression, we can see some important categories that arise, some subcategories that extend from these, which contribute to a hard heart, such as kufr, disbelief, nifaq, hypocrisy. What's hypocrisy? Hypocrisy is where you pretend to be a believer on the outside, but inside you're a disbeliever, right? So, hypocrisy. Sins. Okay, sins. A person knows Allah has forbade it. They accept that. They know it's in Quran, but they choose not to do it, misusing their ikhtiyar to fail the test and commit sins and transgressions. Like if a person, they know Allah the Exalted has forbidden the drinking of wine. And then they go and they do it. They are committing a sin. Many different things over here. Ghiba, backbiting, slander, many different things amongst the sins. And then we have what scholars classify under major sins and then minor sins. Regardless, they're all sins and they're all types of oppression. Sins are things which are haram to do, or leaving something which is wajib to do. And you have no excuse for this. You don't have a medical excuse for it. You don't have last option. Each case is you have to go and research, look into, check with your marja on what he says on these things. Like there's different types of situations, and Islam is very special in its rulings and how we could deal with things and interact with things. The problem sometimes may be just finding the right answer, and you don't want to just assume on yourself without proper knowledge and make a big mistake. So the problem sometimes is maybe access to the right answers. So we can say that oppression contributes to a hard heart. And from oppression, we can see some important categories like disbelief, nifaq, and sins. All of these contribute to the hardness of the heart. All of these contribute to the hardness of the heart. Also, another thing that contributes to the hardness of the heart is arrogance, racism. A person thinks, as example, of a type of arrogance is a person thinks that they are better than other people just because of their race. Just because they were born of a certain race, they think that they are better than everybody else. So then they look down on others. They may not look down on everyone. They may have a group of people, a group of ethnicities that they say, okay, they're not racist toward. But when they go and they interact with somebody who they have this kind of racism to, they think they're better than them, then then they are then they are racist to them. They're better than, they think they're better than them. They're arrogant about them. They're arrogant about it. So arrogance can be another factor in hardening of the heart. So look as example, when we want to look at an example of a hard heart, let us reflect for a moment on those who oppressed and killed Imam Hussein alayhi salam and his family members and his companions. These people, to be able to commit such a thing, must have had hard hearts. So to be able to initiate such a thing, command people to do it, they must have been hard-hearted. Look how hard-hearted those who oppressed and killed Imam Hussein alayhi salam was. You know, you can see in the story of Hur how his heart turned and he changed his direction. He had a soft heart. Although hardness of heart may not be as obvious as that. You know, when a person has a hard heart, it may not be as obvious as the events of Karbala, of course. That's, you know, these people, like Shimr and Yazid, these people must have had hard hearts to be able to command such a thing to be done. It's not always as obvious that a person has such a hard heart. It could be more subtle. It could be more hidden. It could be more unobvious. So it is something that we must actually be aware of and conscious of within our very self. So we have to look within ourselves and see, are we hard-hearted? Are things really impacting us? And if they are not, now we should take steps to soften the heart, to remove the hardness of the heart from us. So that is where I will leave this lesson, inshallah, and we'll continue next week. Wa akhir dawana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.